Folks, what if I told you that you could sit down with a supplier of slab material to the countertop industry and ask them questions for how to set up the best relationship that you can with slab suppliers? Would you like that? Well, that's what I got a chance to do. And we're going to sit down and have a great conversation with Erik Rapp of Everest Stone. You may know him as Everest Erik on Facebook. Have a listen. So Erik Rapp, the man, the myth, the legend. I mean, I really do appreciate you taking some time to talk with us today. We chatted a little bit at coverings last week. The
Yeah,
topic that came up was trying to help fab shop owners work with their slab suppliers a lot more effectively, and there's some other aspects of that as well. Just really appreciate you taking some time to talk with us today.
sure. Yeah, glad to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Super, thank you. For folks who don't know you, can you kind of give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you the quick summary. So, I'm from Utah originally, born and raised. I've answered this a few times, but how did I get into the industry? So, before that, grew up pretty poor, and parents that didn't quite know how to make ends meet. So it was kind of a necessity, born out of necessity to learn how to work so I could, provide for myself. So from a young age, I had my own little lawn mowing business, at the age of 12. Did a bunch of various projects, but we were lucky enough to live down the street from a gentleman that was operating a little tile company out of his garage. And so my three brothers and I decided that that was the best way to make money, on weekends, nights, summer. And so we got into the tile business, at early teenage years, and kind of did that all through school. And that was a great little thing for us, to make money. I went and served a church service mission, and when I got back, that was kind of the only skill, that I thought I had, and so I jumped right back into that trade. And we did some big builder work on the tile side, and realized within the first year I hated it. I wasn't a good tile setter, so it was
Uh,
probably the best thing for me to move on from that. So lucky enough to know some people in the industry that were on the wholesale side. And so I went and interviewed with Arizona Tile, who had been the biggest player to move into Utah, in that time. This is early 2000s at that point.
sure.
And went and interviewed with the GM there. Good man, was a great mentor to me. And so they gave me an opportunity to be at their order desk. And I quickly rose through the ranks in that first year to take over their slab division for Utah. I did that for about 6 years. And then they made some interesting moves on the downturn, which everybody, had to. And so when I saw that writing on the wall, I made the move to Dow Tile. This is the 2008 to 2009 timeframe. And so I went and joined them. And same thing, rose through the ranks to be able to take over as GM for the Utah division. That included St. George, and Salt Lake, and then help them with some regional stuff, and at the end there with a few national things. But yeah, great time there. It was about a year and a half ago that I just had decided, I've been doing this about 20 years on the wholesale corporate side, and I just didn't see a future past that time frame, and so I decided I was going to move on and get out of wholesale completely. So decided I'm going to do that, and when I left, I became the national director for the Rockheads group for their vendor member engagement. Did that for about a year. Love that group, still affiliated with them, but it brought me kind of into this, resources like Ed Young, right, and Rockheads and some of these organizations that just help fabricators become, better, more profitable. So I love the time there. I'm still very much affiliated with them, very participatory in their group and others. And then at that same time, I was doing a little bit of work at a friend's fab shop. So kind of coming full circle, realize being the customer, right, to the wholesaler at that point, I could see some error in some of my thought processes, right, as the big wholesaler. And so seeing that side of the business was eye-opening to me. I think it's given me a great perspective on how I can help fabricators seeing what they see, but also seeing the wholesaler side of it. And so after that, I had been talking to a few wholesalers that wanted me to get back into the wholesale side. Wasn't really interested in a corporate offer. But the one that was intriguing to me, Brad, who's the sole owner of the Everest Stone Group. Quick story on Brad. He just starts this company about 12 years ago. Young kid going to college, and he decides that he's going to start up a slab distribution company. Super smart guy. and he builds this juggernaut of a business while he's going to college, which to me was amazing because when I went to college, I couldn't even go to college, right? I wasn't great at it, and he's doing college plus, building this business. So the way he's built it is very simple, not a lot of overhead. It's a hub and spoke system. They've got quality, they've got value, right? They've just been able to build a really nice, and it's fabricator focused, the businesses. And so the offer was, what do you need to come over? I said, I need four things. I need to own my time. I need to own my financial roadmap. I need to own my name or my brand. For a long time, I just stood behind the brand names that I'd promoted, which I was fine to do. But I think on this next 20 years of my career, I want to be kind of the focal point of what our customers connect with, which is a big deal to me.
Sure.
And then the last one was just the charitable side of business. That's a big deal to me. Growing up poor, I want to be able to give back. And so every crazy idea I've brought up to Brad to participate, he's opened up the checkbook without a question. And in the first 6 months of us doing that together, we had done more than I'd done in about the last 5 years, of charitable outreach. So that's kind of the short story from me going all the way to the private side of wholesale.
Understood. So what are some of
Yeah.
the, before we get into the topic at hand, what are some of the charitable things that you guys have been doing?
Well, so cancer is a big deal. So most of us have someone, right, a loved one that's dealt with that kind of stuff. So we do a lot of those type of charitable organizations. So there's a Huntsman Cancer Institute, which is the premier in the nation here in Utah. We always do at least once a year a countertop type of program, right, where they'll raffle off a full, kitchen remodel, bathroom remodel. We get local fabricators to do that with us. Accent, who's members of the Rockheads group, are always great with that side of it, and then we participate in the materials. We've also done charitable golf tournaments for that type of thing. Everyone loves a reason to golf and win a driver or something like that. I'm so done with golf too. I didn't realize how much clubs cost. So the last one that we did was for friends organization up in northern Utah, and they said, "Oh yeah, you get off easy this time. We just need you to buy these two clubs," and the two clubs total were like $1,300.
Holy smokes!
I was like, "Oh, okay." I was thinking a couple $100. So that's the non-golfer in me, but yeah, we've done some really great work on that side of it. We do a lot of promotions for the local schools as well. There's a lot of low-income schools in the area, so we like to do some different things for them.
That's awesome, man. Always glad to hear about folks giving back. Like a lot of the initiatives that are in the industry, the Gary Sinise Foundation, that
Yep.
sort of thing.
Yep.
So it's really good to hear that that's a key component of what you guys are doing. That's awesome.
Love the Gary Sinise thing. Real fast on that. We've participated in 3 of those homes, and even though we don't get to really interact with the wounded warriors that get those homes, we've always loved the story and to be able to see our materials in after. But yeah, every time one of those comes available, we jump right in. So those have been fun to see.
Very cool. Very cool. I think that's one of the great things about this industry. There's a lot of that kind of thing going on. I think in a lot of cases, we don't talk enough about it. I think it's something we really could stand to help improve the visibility of our industry and the image of our industry. Not that it's bad, but to help make it even better.
Sure.
Talk more about that because there's a lot of good stuff going on.
Yeah.
Talking about Rockheads, I was doing some work with some presentations with Rich Katzman, director
Yep.
of Rockheads, last week at Coverings.
Yep.
He had mentioned to me that you had a lot of knowledge and experience and were willing to share a lot of that on how fabricators can work effectively with their slab suppliers.
Sure.
And you and I chatted briefly, and thankfully you agreed to come share some of that with us. So
Yep.
where's a good place to start? There are a lot of different
Yeah.
angles to this, but I'm sure you've got maybe a good starting point we can jump into here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that plug from Rich. Him and I were on the last call that I did as an official Rockhead right before I left. We did buying strategy, and we had a couple fabricators on, and then we had me. Just great. And we went, typically we end right at the hour, and I think we went over like 20 minutes with no complaints, right? Everybody's staying on the call because it was great content. But yeah, the best spot to start, I think, is historically, right? To take us all the way back to the early 2000s. So when I started, it was single source supply, right? Every fabricator, if you were a dowel guy, you were 100% dowel. Everything came from them, every stick, every slab. You'd VE everything to their color product, right? And that was kind of how we started. Everyone was single supply, right? So it was really big deal to win someone because you had them for life if you did that. The first downturn kind of showed that was probably a failed strategy because everyone did it differently and everyone came out differently. So for most of the fabs, I think it's not needed to be said, but that's where we always started, is make sure that you have multiple strong relationships in the industry and make sure you have it from multiple players. You need at least one to two of the big guys, right? The Daltiles, the Cosentinos. Those guys do a great job of weathering storms, right? So they give you some balanced perspective on, how things ebb and flow. But it's also important to have some of these smaller mom and pop or regional distributors in there as well. They give you a little bit more flexibility on pricing guidelines. They can go outside of the box, color outside the lines. So at least having a couple in each kind of segment is important. So that's a big thing that we start off with, is just make sure you're diversified in who's helping you in your market, and don't be sole supply in any one, and make sure you've got multiples. So,
All right. So if a shop is going to take this advice, maybe they're heavily invested in maybe in one, maybe two suppliers, and they want to go find some more. Maybe they're dealing mostly with the big companies. They want to find maybe a smaller regional supplier.
sure.
How do they find them, and what should they look for as they're evaluating these suppliers? What are some of the characteristics they should look for? What are some questions they should ask?
Sure. I think there's two easy ones. Make sure, and this is just a plug, for you and others. I think there are people in the industry that have been doing this so long and in such a concise way that they can really help educate, because they know most everyone, right? So find yourself an Ed Young, find yourself someone that's in that. The other part is being a part of one of these organizations, right? Depending on your size and what you're wanting to do. I love promoting the Rockheads, right? But Rockheads is for those larger shops, right? The barrier of entry, it's an already established shop, but they do great things, right? If it's a smaller shop, right? Maybe an SFA and ISFA, All Slab Fabbers is one of these up and comers, right? So you could affiliate with one of those. There's a ton of great resources within the group. The other thing, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, Ed, the forums. There's multiple forums for people to get on. If you're not part of one, it's free, right? You just have to kind of be okay with social media and all the craziness, but there's a lot of golden tidbits in there. If you can get through all the craziness of social media, there's a ton of stuff. And I monitor almost every major chat room, right? Most major blogs and groups. You can find a lot of information there. So one, be a part of a group, right? If you can officially join one and participate, right? Help others, because everyone elevates as you do that. And then the second one, just participate in the forums. You'll get a lot of great content. And you'll find Ed Young's in there. You'll find a lot of people that, are there just to help, fabricators do better.
I'm still amazed at how many shop owners I run across that have never been to a trade show. They're not a member of any kind of group. And I can remember when I had my own brick and mortar business back, I guess at least 40 years ago, how lonely it was as the owner of a small business. I finally put together a small group of advisors to help me out a little bit. Finally got smart about it. But if you're not in a situation like that where you've got some advisors, getting involved in these groups and attending these events is just you find out that you're not the only one struggling with whatever your issue of the day is, or the 5 that you've got this week and the 20 next week. You're really a good chance to learn from other folks and to partially quote a Bible verse, steel sharpens steel, so one man sharpens another. We work with each other and learn, and we all get better together. And I think there's just a huge advantage.
Yeah, and participating in those groups, I'll give you like one of the best stories I've ever heard. And it's a tinge bit emotional too. I'll go back to the Rockheads group, because this is where I got this one from. But Tennessee, right? Dixon and Nashville, right? You've got a nice, maybe 5 large fabricators and then about 10, smaller, shops that are in that area. But anyway, a few years ago, just randomly, there's this tornado that comes through and it blows apart Dwayne, if you know, or Dewan, Coakley's shop, Stone World, right there in Tennessee. And for whatever reason, he's the only one that gets hit in this path of this tornado, right? And it just destroys his shop, almost levels it. And so he's not able to operate. And all of his direct competition that we're all essentially in that same market, right? And you would think blood in the water, right? You're going to go after his business because now he can't perform. Every one of them, right? And this is Metro that helped them. Derek over there helped him, but they all chipped in to help Dewan keep his business afloat and fabricated jobs for him until he could get rebuilt. I think that shows the power of these groups, because I think a lot of people go in and be like, well, I'm not going to give my inside information or any of this, right? I don't want to help my competition, but I think it's the opposite. Like your steel sharpens steel comment. I think everyone gets better as they share, but it's been the opposite for me. I've actually seen where all of them help tremendously. I mean, if you need help getting into a big box, right? I see that all the time. How do I get these big box contracts? Well, there's 100 of those guys across the country, and they all chip in to help each other. This is what I would do in your market, right? This is how I would entertain. This is how I would go to market. Even on, some of these last ones that we've done where it's just these ideas of how to be more efficient in the shop, right? Drive more of that. And right now, you and I were talking about this as well. We're seeing a lot of them kind of contribute to improve their sales strategy, because sales are soft for everyone, but everyone's helping each other figure out how to improve their sales strategy. So I think it's the opposite, right? If you're not participating in one or multiple of those groups, I think you're missing out as a fabricator.
Preaching to the choir, man. Good advice. I love it.
Yep.
So your first recommendation dealing with suppliers was to have multiples, have some of the big guys, and then have some of the smaller regional players. What are some other things that shop owners should look at or should think about as they're working with their slab suppliers?
Sure. So I'll go to kind of the strategy. This is one of the hot topics that Rich and I covered on that last call. You always want to make sure you have backup supply in any of your program colors. So everyone wants to go to programs now, right? Whether it's a palette, whether it's, a 42 color grouping system, whatever that looks like. But make sure that you're backing up your sole supply with a backup supply that has an identical crossover or virtually identical is a big deal for any of these guys. Good example, frost is a popular color, right? That's MSI's color. Basic quartz, everyone uses it, by the boatload. Because it's such a supply and demand color, a lot of time there are stockouts. Well, the interesting part with that color is everyone uses either MSI's factory or a similar factory to be able to produce that color. So if I'm a fabricator and that's my number one color, and I know there's potential for stockouts, I'm going to back that up with supply from an Arizona Tile, from an Everest Stone Group, any of these guys that can back that up. And then make sure your clients know that there could be some variation in the materials, but make sure that that's just in the disclosures, right? Hey, this is a natural variance in this product, and show them the sample of MSI and then show them the sample of your backup or have photos. It's a really strong sourcing strategy, so you're never facing stockouts. And we've seen a lot that have implemented this. It's a smart way to play it, so that way you're never caught, without materials when you need them.
That advice was probably worth its weight in gold back about, 21, 22. Yep. Shipping was horrendously expensive, and supply is really hard to get materials. And so having multiple sources would have been a lifesaver if you had that strategy back then.
Yep, 100%. And we've seen kind of some variations with that. So we've got a couple instances with shipping out of India right now. This is kind of the hot one right now. The Houthis are enjoying blowing up ships, in that major trade route, and so it's causing issues. You have two strategies, right? Either they're paying for escort, right, armed escort to come through, or they're going around the long way, right, which both cost money. So that shipping cost has gone up. It's important for you to have backups on that, right? Because it's not only costing more, but it's delaying shipments. So chances of stock out over the next few months with this India, shipping issue, it's always great to have that backup in that. The other thing is, it's interesting, as quartz has become so popular, everyone thinks they have the secret sauce for their color. But the fact is, you can show me a sample. Like if you showed me a sample right now, Ed, of, hey, this is my favorite Calcutta Extreme, right? I guarantee you within 30 minutes, I could have you 3 or 4 options from other factories in other countries that are virtually identical. So same thing there, right? We can't put all of our eggs in one basket. You want to make sure that you've got some strong backup.
So if I'm a shop owner and I'm going to start looking around for some additional suppliers, follow some of this advice to give me some backups, probably one of the questions I want to start asking is, where is your supply coming from? Is it coming through the Suez Canal? Has it got to go around Africa? You're coming out of India? The situations you just talked about are things I would want to know as a shop owner if I'm looking at evaluating a new supplier, to make sure that those issues don't bite me as a fab shop owner.
Yeah, and it's a reasonable, and you'd ask the question, right? Or what are some of those questions to ask to make sure you're aligning with the right partner? One of those is transparency, right? That's been a big thing for me in the industry. If you get a supplier that won't give you a definitive answer, there's one of two things going on, right? Either number one, they don't want to tell you because they're pulling it from multiple sources, which could be concerning as well, right? As far as die lot matches, any of that kind of thing. Or number two, they're pulling it from somewhere they shouldn't be, and they're doing transshipped documents, right? And that, although the pricing looks intriguing, you're the one as the importer of record, right? The final recipient of material. You're the one that's going to be held accountable if they're doing any of this, falsified documentation for transshipping. So that's either of those is really the only valid reasons I could see why someone wouldn't share, the source of supply, for their supply chain.
As a fab shop owner, if a supplier was doing that to me, how would I know it? It'd be something I have to sign somewhere, but is any indicators I'd look for?
Yeah, that's a great one. Number one, usually the shipping documents, right? So if they're doing that, you can ask for shipping documents from those. If they're shipping you materials direct, it's always great to check the crating, right, of the materials, or the tagging on the materials. They're getting pretty sophisticated, so they're doing a lot of doctored paperwork, but there's still some subtle signs to be able to tell. Crating is usually a pretty big one. If it's a supply route that's in Malaysia, right, they're just telling you Malaysia, anything that is designated from Malaysia is a hot button topic for the Trade Commission. So those containers are almost always getting dinged or reviewed. So that's usually a telling sign. If they're not forthcoming with any of that information, right, the shipping documents, etc., it's usually a sign of they're trying not to give you all the detail.
So reputation of the supplier is a big issue, and that's again another value of a lot of these membership groups in the industry.
Yep.
Networking, talking to folks, finding out who's got a good reputation, who doesn't, and kind of knowing who to stay away from.
Yep. And it ebbs and flows too. I mean, there's certain times where there's been companies that have been on the top of their game, right? And then you see kind of a slide from them, right? It's interesting. One of my favorite fabricators, Precision, Stephen Robert over on the West Coast, gigantic, $80 million shop. They do an annual report, which they typically will share. I don't know if it's within the groups or they'll share it freely, but they actually grade the suppliers on a couple of key factors. One of those is supply, so one of those is service. It's interesting to see, those grades come out each year, and they're pretty accurate. I mean, you saw, I'm not going to throw stones here, but Caesar Stone, who's been one that's been at the top of their game, right? You've seen some significant slides from them. I think everyone is seeing that in the market, and it's effectively shown in their reported earnings, right? They've lost a tremendous amount of money, and market share, and so we've seen that where it was once a stellar, company on the grading scale, and you've seen the last few years where that's kind of slid, so sometimes it's just this variable, right? And hopefully, they figure it out and they resume, the great business that they've once done. But that's important information that's available, when you're interacting with these groups as well.
Good deal. Awesome. What are some other tips for folks as they start to evaluate and try to improve how they source their materials?
Sure. So, we went over the strategy, having a couple bigs, having a couple, the mom and pops, the Everest piece, and I'll kind of throw this out there. The Everest model is not new by any means, but I've really enjoyed fabricators utilizing an Everest or a Brothers or a Connect or any of these local where they're doing a hub and spoke system, because here's a value add. It's almost it's one step removed from being an importer of record, which, we could talk about in a minute. But it's one step removed from importer of record, but you're getting the benefit of being the importer on pricing. But then you're getting just these truckloads delivered to you. So you're not having to offload containers. You're getting a truckload, offload it, right? You're getting that great pricing. Everest has been good because they also give some pretty extended terms or interesting price points. So they've got some variables, with that. But those type of models, I think, is a great third option to have. So you've got 1 to 2 of the big suppliers, you got 1 to 2 of the mom and pop or regional distributors, and then 1 to 2 of kind of an Everest direct model, right, where they're offloading the containers and shipping those to you on truckloads. Is pretty good. It's also a great way for you to get your pricing down, because they're not, if you look at the model where Stone collection's a great example, right? And I know a lot of our, your clients would know Stone Collection. Great business, really gorgeous showrooms. No one walks into Stone Collection thinking that they're going to get a bargain deal, right? You walk into that and you think, okay, I'm paying for this showroom. And the experience is incredible, nothing like it. But you also know that you're paying for that showroom. This is the opposite side of that, right? In this business model, we don't build showrooms, right? We want to be able to pass those savings off, and a showroom is just an additional cost. Whereas we've really set up the program to be fabricator, it's fabricator first and always, right? So the fabricators are clear business, right? So we want to figure that out. So that's another great one, is to get 1 to 2 of that kind of direct truckload, one step removed from direct container imports.
Good. Awesome. That's a different model I hadn't heard much about lately. When I ran a shop back before the recession, we had 2 or 3 primary suppliers. That was about it. Did a lot of consignment. Didn't really have a lot of the options that are out there now. So it's good to hear that in the last 20 years things have picked up a little bit. There's some good things to look at, some good options to choose from.
Yep. A good segue too. You talked about consignment. One of the hot topics too that we covered on the Rockets call. We had a couple people asking, what's the best strategy to use when they're trying to implement new colors? Time frame and all that. It's interesting. All the factories are a little bit different, but most of them are somewhat the same. You get 1 to 2 new color palette additions per year. Usually they'll do a summer launch and then they'll do a fall launch, towards the end of Q3, Q4. When we were talking to these guys about strategy, it is always a great idea to ask them for consignment. So you're getting a lot of these guys coming out and showing you the new color palettes, hey, this is going to be great for your market. It is appropriate for you to ask if there is extended terms, longer terms, or consignment options on those. What it does for you is it really helps you gauge the market without buying out the farm. You're able to gauge that market based on that color palette, and give yourself a little bit of time to put that in the right programs and to be able to move it. So any of the fabricators that are looking to implement new colors, the wholesaler is not going to be offended by you asking for one of those things, right? Longer terms, extended terms, or a consignment program to try out this new color. I think it shows them that you're willing to partner and try, and they love that. So that's a great strategy. The other thing we talked about is when to implement those. It is always great in the end of Q4 because they're looking at clearance items, right? They're going to do some drops at the middle of the year. Sometimes they'll do drops a second time towards the end of the year. And this is the larger, wholesalers. It's always great to look at their clearance options at the end of the year. But same thing, give yourself some extended terms. If consignment's available, you reduce your taxation at the end of the year. It's a great model for you, right? You just restocked your inventory. You're ready to hit January running, but you still have cash flow, right? So it's a great thing. It's a great tax strategy. It's a good cash flow strategy. So implementing that at the end of Q4 is always great. And negotiate. This was another thing everyone was chuckling with, but I said I was part of the worst negotiations, right? But always negotiate. These guys at some point with aged inventory, they have to look at it, especially if they're publicly traded. They have to look at it, either I blow it out, write it off, right? They have to have some mechanism to clear that off the books, especially the larger guys. I mean, when you get to the end of the year, you're talking millions in redundant inventory that they need to move. They're very enticed to move that in that period of time. So if you come with an offer to take a lot of it off their hands, but then you negotiate to pennies on the dollar, they're going to push back. But again, most of the time, play your long game and they should come back around with a feasible offer that's a win-win for both of you. And when I'm saying pennies on the dollar, we've seen some stuff go for 50 cents a square foot, $1 a square foot. It's not always going to happen that way, but put your best negotiating hat on and make sure that you leverage the length of time that you have to make that decision where they don't.
As you mentioned negotiating, I'm thinking a question that could come up, there's when I started in the industry about 20 years ago, and this was right about the time the DuPont program was cranking up. There were DuPont's data said there were about 6,000 fabricators in the U.S. The average size was about $3 million a year in sales. And data I've been able to find recently says we've probably doubled that number, give or take. But that average size is still about $3 million a year in sales. And there's some reasons for that, I think. But what I'm thinking about is a lot of the smaller guys out there are kind of wondering, so what, as a smaller shop, I do $1 million, $2, $3 million a year in sales. what kind of leverage can I have with a slab supplier compared to somebody like Precision, who's $80 million a year?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So my top of mind answer for that would be one, the relationship always, right? Just keep that relationship strong with those guys. If you're a smaller shop, and I'll speak to my time in Utah, I had some small shops that were just great partners for me. They were a lot of times participatory in some of the clearance items, because for small shops, again, if you can make, an extra 20 points on materials, right? Because you were buying some of this clearance stuff. Smaller shops too are typically K and B, dealer shops. They're typically heavy in retail, so they have a lot of flexibility where the larger guys don't. That's a huge play. I mean, if I look at the history of dealing with larger shops, 10 million plus guys, those guys oftentimes are so set in those programs that they don't get a lot of leeway. You're talking, average for those guys is about 15% of their materials that they control. And this is your big box, those kind of things. Where the smaller shops, I mean, run all day long with the fact that you can alter your color palette as you see fit. That's a big deal, with these guys. And again, just relationship, and always reward the guys that are out hungry looking for it, right? Just because you've always had this same guy. This is one of the things that drives me crazy, as we've built programs for people to save them money. And then they go and they take that program right back to their current guy because he's like 5 minutes from them. And he's like, oh, I'll match it, right? Number one, that guy's been living high on the hog from you, right? So
Yeah.
that to me has never made a lot of sense, right? If someone's willing to take advantage of a higher price point and make really significant margins, and then all of a sudden someone's really competitive in the market and all of a sudden they drop that. So always give the guys that are hungry, that are out chasing, trying to earn the business is a big deal. The one I love, and I've always implemented this strategy, look for the guys that are willing to help you build the business. So a lot of times I'll create the demand and then sell that demand solution to that fabricator. Great example, Valley View, who's a great NSI board member. Blake's built a wonderful shop there in northern Utah. We were working on a shower surround program for them, but instead of just saying, hey, look at this, I've got, these 3 colors, they're amazing, best in the world, I can get you containers for X amount. We actually went and I partnered with them to go and interact with their local builders that I knew very well from my time with the big box, and all that stuff. And we were able to build some entry points for them using our product, but then getting them opportunities. So anyone that's willing to do that for you, that's a true partner, right? So if you have a wholesale partner that's willing to do that, I mean, that's worth its weight in gold, right? You get a free sales rep and they get the win off of selling you more material.
Man, that's awesome to hear that you're doing that kind of work. That's above and beyond. I'm thinking about the flip side of that coin in terms of the fabricator's role in being a good partner. I know one of the things that was big for us on the shop that I ran right before the recession was we had a lot of consignment material, and we were really diligent every month about doing an accurate inventory about that and making sure that if we sold material and it was time for us to write a check to the supplier, we did that. Because they brought us some really good colors. And all of our consignment was natural stone at that time.
Sure.
But they really helped us out with a lot of options. And if we had bundles that weren't moving, they were great about swapping that out. But I think too, if we hadn't been a good partner from our side about being honest about what we're selling, taking care of the product, being very transparent about our inventory and where we were, I think it would have been a lot tougher for those suppliers to treat us that way too. So that's part of the two-way street, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the consignment thing, I think you hit a great topic there, right? Being forthcoming as the fabricator to get that details to that wholesaler, right? So they don't feel like they have to police you or they're getting really funny answers. If you get yourself into a pinch, here's another thing I've been advising a lot of fabricators is cash becomes a crunch. If you're facing a cash crunch, give the full detailed analysis to that wholesaler right from the get-go. Most of them are going to work with you. I mean, I've worked with, 3 major now. I've worked with my clients every time. The worst thing is when they don't tell me and they get themselves so far gone that we can't make any decisions. And there's been a few right now, that I've heard, in the industry that, it's been significant and they just haven't got the details. That's a big thing, right? So if you've got consignment or you have significant AR on the books for these guys, just be honest with them, right? It gives us an opportunity as the wholesaler to make effective decisions to help you. one of the things is if you haven't moved the inventory, it's redundant, like you were saying, right? But it's invoiced out, it's not a consignment. They probably can get that sold somewhere else, get you a fresh set of books so that you can keep, the AR rotating. That's a good solution. Even, and this is one on the AR side of being a good partner if you're small or large fab shop. Consistent payments is also a big thing, right? Even if you owe a significant amount, weekly payments are a great solution for an accounting department to feel comfortable that at least they're chipping away and allow them to keep you open and running with these smaller weekly payments that should be feasible, and doable. It's a great solution for that. On the other side of the consignment thing, I've seen a push, and I've kind of been pushing this way as well. If you're in an outlying area and it's difficult to get regular transit trucks, instead of doing consignment program where you're gonna, and I'll just be honest about consignment, nothing's free, right? So consignment, you typically pay 15% higher. We'll give an average there. You're about 15% higher than the regular cost that you would pay. And it's because that person is looking, right? That wholesaler is looking at about 2% on their cash. If they're effectively financing your extended terms, they're going to be about 2% on that money per month. It's an average, but if you look at 6 months, right, you've paid an additional 12%. You have to build that somewhere, right? Nothing's for free. And so on some of those where it's a color is going to do well, like Taj Mahal, great example. If you have Taj, you're going to sell Taj, right? It's still one of the most popular colors in the world right now. Don't consign it, just do an extended terms on it, right? If you're nervous about it, ask that wholesaler, hey, could I extend these terms out? Can I get a lengthened term? Most of the time they're going to work with you, especially on a higher price point. But the nice thing with that is you're locking in a little bit better pricing. So you're not taking a 15% overage, right? You might get down to, hey, I want to run this for 90 days, 120 days, right? If they'll do it, I think you're going to save, 6 to 12% depending on the terms that you pick with them.
Okay, so asking for extended terms in lieu of consignment can get you a better price point. That's great advice.
Yep. And then even on that one, again, you try it, you do that, and it's not going to move. Let that wholesaler know, hey, I'm having trouble moving this, and see if they can help you move it in the local market, right?
Okay. So a lot of good examples of both sides of the coin, how fab shop owners and slab material suppliers can partner with each other. Both of them have responsibilities in that role, and if they both hold up their end of the bargain, it can be a really good relationship.
Yeah.
Super.
This one just came to mind, and this is just throwing out pretty dumb ideas that might effectively work for some people. So I'm sure if you were to pull 100 of your fabricators, right, that work with you, and ask them about sampling, right, from their major brands, right, any of the big guys on their top 10 colors, I bet you would get some expletive filled, responses from some of those guys. They never have it, right? They never have the samples, et cetera, et cetera. I like what Everest has done, where we actually buy additional materials and we cut them from full slabs in our Dallas location. It's been a really solid play that we've made. But one of the ideas that I had, for one of the best idea contests we were doing with the Rockheads group was essentially everyone has a sink cutout, right? And if you're cutting the top 10 most popular colors, essentially taking those sink cutouts and cutting those into your squares. Nominally 4x6 is the most used sample size in the industry right now with all the larger guys. Cut those all into 4x6s and collect them until you can get a pallet of those top 10 colors, and then go and pitch to have the wholesaler buy those samples back from you. I'll tell you, if someone did that for me when I was at Dow, I would have bought $100, $300, $500 pallets of samples, because it was way better than me sending an email to marketing every Monday. Hey, can I get, and they'll send you a box of 5, right? They'll send you a box of 10. It's like, I needed 100 of those a month ago, right? If any of the fabricators have struggled with getting sampling from their local suppliers, be the solution. Cut them up from your sink cutouts, because no one's really using the sink cutouts. And if you're still using those as a cutting board giveaway, stop. Like those should have went away, right? But cut them up into squares and sell them back. Use some for your local stuff, but sell them back to the wholesaler and make some of your costs back. I think it's a great solution.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. Plus, it agreed. People just really the homeowner thinks they're going to use that as a cutting board. The first time they pick it up, they realize that's not happening. And all you're going to do is damage the countertop they just spent thousands of dollars for in the first place. Plus, it saves the fabricator from having to put that stuff in a dumpster and pay to have it hauled off. So it's a win all the way around.
Yep.
Fantastic. Any other recommendations before we get into this crazy concept of doing your own direct importing, pluses and minuses?
Yeah, let's talk through. Oh, I'm trying to think on some of them. We've been getting a lot of hits on warranty stuff on quartz, so I want to kind of clarify that for everybody. This is more
Sure.
just an industry kind of insider thing because we get this a lot, in all the forums. So quartz it was first marketed, right? Quartz, if you know when it started, you're talking clear back. This product is pretty old. Everyone's seen it in the last 10 to 12, but it was along, much before that.
Yeah.
Their marketing strategy was to go after the big dog that was taking up all the market, right? And that was granite, right? So this is what happened with the radon scare, right? Was a quartz driven initiative, right? Pretty funny to me. And we all had to deal with these Geiger counters. This is like 2005, I think, when it hit.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they did when they marketed it as well is they marketed it as bulletproof material, right? If you see the first marketing from 2005, 2006, I mean, that's all they're saying, right? This is an indestructible countertop, quartz, 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 can't get any better. You don't have to seal it. You don't have to do any of these things. The funny thing with quartz is everyone has gotten to understand it, but no one wants to just say the quiet part out loud, right? And the quiet part out loud is quartz was made for designers so that they can design with color fast samples, right? So they don't have to send someone down. It's super efficient. It's really easy for fabricators to work with, but that material is not bulletproof, right? So a lot of the things that we're getting, in the forums right now, we've just always known. So you can scratch it, right? You can cause some acidic reaction, especially on the high polished materials. And if you know of the gloss meter rating, the higher the gloss meter rating on your quartz, the more visible it is to acid sensitivity, right? If guys are
Yep.
using Barkeeper's Friend, acetone, any of the traditional stuff that stone guys love to use, those are still being used consistently on quartz. If you're good with it, you know how to use it, it's typically not going to cause any issues, but you get a lot of guys that are, new installers, whatever that be, those haze marks, et cetera, any of that kind of stuff. Those type of scenarios, we just want to make sure that everybody's aware. Those are common amongst brands. So I hear this all the time. Oh, my Silestone's never done that, right? Oh, my Daltile One Quartz has never done that. It's a fallacy, right? All of it's made. There's no real secret sauce to manufacturing quartz, right? You've got your resin, you got your binders, and you got your quartz composition. Everyone has a little bit of variability on that, but the majority of it is the fact is that can always be damaged as a surface. And again, you should probably just understand which of these companies are going to back you, on the warranty side of it, but also understand that the product is the product. You've got to be understanding that this stuff can be damaged and it's not inherently a manufacturing defect. It's just preparing the homeowner. It's similar to like marble, right? The guys that sell marble countertops really well, they explain the heck out of it. Hey, this stuff is going to scratch, it's going to patina, you could acid etch it, all these things. And these guys sell a tremendous amount, but they're great at explaining that to the client. I would love to see fabricators become true experts in that arena of explaining that to their customers. The one thing I'll say on the warranty side of it too, if you look at any of the literature from the main manufacturers, they've adjusted their literature as they've gone along. If you look at these hard 90s, right, that everyone loves to do, these hard interior 90s, and you see it on the forums, and it's like, just, I want to beat my head against the wall because it's been the last 10 years. You'll get that forum, post of like, hey, this is a manufacturer's defect, but they won't answer me. If you look back at all the main literature from these guys, none of them will recommend a hard 90. And most of them have gone even further than that, where they're saying multiple seams in the product, a Euro seam, a deck seam. They're giving you additional ways to manufacture that. But really what the manufacturers have done is move themselves further away from warranty claims when people are taking those hard corners on the inside, of the material. So that's another thing I'd like to see fabricators be aware of, with the product, is just understand quartz can be acidic, can be sensitive to acids. It's not bulletproof, right? And again, be careful on your corner, your details that you're offering customers. Make sure they know that there has to be a radius, right? At least a 3/8 radius is the industry standard at the moment on those interior corners.
Yep. It's Yeah, it goes back to just, knowing your business, knowing your materials, and then being able to help a prospect, to help a homeowner understand that. One of the things I tell clients all the time is that when you stop and think about it, people change jobs more often than they buy countertops. They buy more houses, they buy more cars, and they buy countertops. And you go online, you can find all sorts of information about all those activities to help you do them better, how to negotiate the best price on a new car or a used car. But trying to find good, solid information on countertop materials and what the process should look like and their role in that, what the expectation should be. It's few and far between. What's out there isn't always definitive. And so it's a really good opportunity, I think, for a shop to differentiate themselves with a prospect, to be able to sit down and educate that homeowner and build some confidence with the homeowner and build their confidence in you as a fabricator, as a shop owner, to be able to take the time to help them understand what you just talked about. Hey, there's limitations. Every material's got its pluses and minuses. How do you use your kitchen? All those classic questions, and take the time to help the homeowner understand that, so that a year from now, when they get up to go make coffee in the morning, they're still happy with the decision they made to pick that material and to have you fabricate it for them.
Yep. And a shameless plug for the Natural Stone Institute, but Jim, great friend of mine, Evan, who will be NSI president next year, good friend of mine. That is a great resource for these guys. It doesn't cost a lot, right, for the membership, but align your sales strategy with the recommended best practices and information from the NSI, because it's all there. It's all for free. Any of the questions I get asked, multiple times, I always point them back to the NSI because it's all there. Really, really concise information on the industry standards, best practices. Huge, huge resource, for the fabricator. So if they're not a member of that, it's a pretty easy, membership to have. But what it gives you in resources, I mean, it's huge. But align your sales strategies, especially on warranty, what to expect, any of those types of things, with the NSI's literature.
Yeah, NSI, phenomenal resource. Definitely recommend that. That's $1,000 a year to join. May sound like a lot of money compared to some other organizations, but not nearly as much as organizations like Rockheads and Artisan Group, which are much more expensive. And not just the product literature and technical literature, but also I did an interview recently with Mark Mario about the safety programs and all the information that they've got available. And it's one of the things I think NSI is probably known for as much as anything else. And there's a lot of really good stuff there too. So yeah, definitely I'm happy with the shameless plug for NSI because it's a great resource.
Sure.
One of the things, as we start to get close to wrapping this up, maybe is some folks, and I've had some clients start to dabble in direct import, go find a supplier offshore and do their own importing of containers of material. Folks who've done that a long time have got a pretty good feel for it. But if you're thinking about dipping your toe in that water, what are some things that a shop owner may want to know before they test that water?
Sure. Yeah. Pros and cons, obviously, most of these guys are pretty solid business guys. They know how to do an ROI assessment, right, on any potential opportunity. That's really something we want to see people looking at, because I've seen that on the forums quite a bit lately. Hey, they saw a buddy that did it, or someone's talking about, I was able to do this. If you look at your inbox, right, you have 100 emails a day from everyone, right, nationwide, globally, right, that has a resource, right, that's better than the last resource. Always do the ROI assessment for you, right? Number one, does that fit with the model of your business is a great first start. So if you're looking at container, right, you're anywhere from 2,800 square feet to 5,500 square feet. If you're 3cm or 2cm, based on the factory, based on the weight qualifications. So just understand, do you have the capacity to store that material, right? A lot of people think they do, but you really have to do an assessment, right? Can I fit an additional 100, 200, 500 slabs in my inventory without causing an issue with just space constraint? Number two, do you have the vehicle to move that much material, right? And then three, is your cash flow sufficient that you could sit on those materials for a period of time? There's a reason why most fabricators aren't great importers. It's because the two models are completely different, right? Fabrication is based on this quick turn. I've got to get, sales in the door, and I've got to turn these jobs. Wholesale is based on the fact that you've got money that sits out there for a long period of time. Are you okay with lower returns on that investment? as that extends out longer. So that's the first thing. Do a quick assessment, right? Is your business actually okay with taking this burden? Number two, and this has been one that I've seen from a lot of the guys, make sure you go and see a shop. And this is where being part of these forums and these groups is great. They'll actually open their doors to you and watch you. You can come and preview a wave unloading containers, from one of your guys that does it well. I did that training at Daltile quite often. I was one of the first managers, I think, that opened my doors to show people how we offloaded containers. And it wasn't the fact of, I want you to become my competitor, but I already knew that they were going to do it. I just wanted them to do it in a safe manner, because it's the most dangerous activity in a fab shop is offloading containers. Everyone says this, that, this. Absolutely not. Like the studies show it, right? Every study we've seen, container offloading is the most dangerous activity and the most unforgiving activity, right? The majority of fatalities have come from container offloads. Make sure you understand what you're getting into, have the proper equipment, the proper protocols. And again, if you're not comfortable with that, I just don't think it's a value add for you to save a couple bucks at the risk of, someone potentially losing life, So
If you
that's,
start talking about fall shadow of one slab being a serious health risk and can be fatal, now we're talking about a bundle of 6, 7, 8 slabs all tied together, and then you get in the fall shadow of that, and it's not if you're going to die, it's how quickly, because it's going to get you.
yeah, it's when, and honestly, you get no area of escape inside of a container. And when you don't have the proper equipment, you have to get inside of that container. It's just a horrible place. So if you're set up correctly, you feel comfortable with it, then I say absolutely. The last thing, and it's vetting out the proper partners. You want to make sure that number one, do you know anyone that's bought from this factory? If you're the first one importing from this factory, good luck. Like that, we always talk about the Italian sandwich, and that's not to be offensive to Italians. When we first started importing materials, right, and they called it the Italian sandwich because the factories knew, I'm going to put a really good slab on the outside, I'm going to put a really good slab on the backside, and then I'm going to put a bunch of marginally quality materials in the center, right? So it passes the initial inspection. You got your photos, everything looks great. When you get that material 90 to 120 days later, you open that thing up, your recourse is very limited, right? You're not, good luck in most countries of getting any recourse from that shipment, right? Most likely you're going to be sitting on it. It's yours to deal with. And It's happened from, I was talking with Evan, who's president of Quality Marble. We were joking about that, right? His first 4 containers were exactly that. They mixed a bunch of crap in. It was his first time importing, right? And he learned the hard lesson. But here's the thing. Everyone's learned that lesson. There's not one importer, if you talk to them, that their first shipments went without problem, unless they had someone that was reputable, that was already doing it, and they just knew how to interact with that company. So it's a great thing to make sure you vet these guys out. Have they sold into the market before? What's the feedback, right? And ask them the questions up front, right? If I get something that's incorrect, what is the recourse for me as the business owner, right? Can I hold money up, right? Also look at their pay terms, right? We've seen where it went from, you used to get some maybe 50% down. You're now seeing about 65 to 70% to get a container moving. You're seeing an additional 15% to get it on the water. And then prior to it docking at port, you're seeing that remaining, or when docking at port, you're seeing that remaining 15%. Some of the better factories have moved back to where there is a percentage of the materials after you receive that you can pay that remainder. Those are better deals for you, because at least there's some leverage. There's not a ton, but there's some leverage for you to make sure you quality inspect that material.
Yeah, you stop and think about it. You've got cash flow issues. You've got a lot of uncertainty about supply, depending on how well you vetted that supplier. You've got logistics and transportation and cost and timing and scheduling of all that. Then you've got the whole importation and customs issues to deal with. You really need a good broker to kind of help you navigate a lot of those waters. Yep. And then you got to kind of step back. And as you said early on, the whole ROI analysis, it's not just the money aspect. It's how much time are you going to invest learning all of this? What's the cost and time of any mistakes that happen? You really need to think this one through. And again, just so much potential value with a lot of these forums, industry groups, membership organizations. Talk to folks who've done it before. learn what works and what doesn't, and really think through this before you jump into it. Because in addition to everything we said, there's some huge potential safety issues if you're not mechanically set up to handle this type of work, because it's totally different than unloading a slab truck.
Yep, 100%. And then look at the ROI. It might be better for you when you analyze all the costs for you on your basic. We're talking group 1, group 2, right? Quartz granite. Those don't make a ton of sense importing direct if you're not set up for it and you that's not your bread and butter. But you want to try some of these higher end materials because there is a huge upswing with higher end materials. So if you've done all the vetting and you want to go that way, and you're a retail or you are a boutique, like that's a great starting point. And there's great resources like I've mentioned, Everest, Brothers, etc. That could help with that. But that's where you see the biggest ROI, from your investment is the higher end materials for sure.
So Erik, we're getting really close to the end of our time here. I know you've got some other commitments you've got to get to. I really do appreciate the information. Appreciate you taking the time to share it with our listeners, because as you and I both like to say, one of the reasons we're here is to help each other out and to help fabricators make more money in their business, have a better business, and hopefully have something they can cash out one day and go retire. So if folks have got questions, how would they get in touch with Everest or with you?
Yeah, so erapp at granitedistributor.com is the best way to get me on email. I'm also a big guy on, having my phone available to everyone. So 801-708-9177. If it's anything Everest related, I'll get that right to the team. We've got a great sales team, 10 sales regional directors that are coast to coast. So we can help with that kind of thing. And then on my end of it, anything personal, that you need to vet out or anything like that on the side, like you, Ed, I love being able to help, even if there's nothing in it for me. Just to help people do better. I think that always comes around, right? Goodwill always return, tenfold.
Absolutely. And I think that's very true. And also too, I see this guy named Everest Erik on Facebook a lot. I think that's you, right?
I knew it was going to come up. Yeah. So that was one of these. I was testing how comfortable Brad was with me owning my own name, right? And he let me do it. But it's one of these things that's taken a personality all its own. But I don't know what it is. It's probably just my brain malfunctioning. But whatever crazy idea I come up with, I put it on a video and I promote it. So if there's anything anyone wants to see from the Everest Erik platform, let me know. The free commercials have been pretty hilarious. So yeah.
Yes, they have. I saw one. I think you did one recently for Speed Label after it was really cool. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Always great. Yep.
Cool stuff. Well, Erik, again, I really appreciate your time and thanks for sharing your expertise, and hopefully that's been of good benefit to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, man.
Yep. Have a good one, buddy.
All right. You too.
See ya.
Wow, that's a lot of good information. Hopefully you got some really good nuggets out of how to work with your slab supplier, how to set up a good strategy for which suppliers you should work with and their sizes. And if you're thinking about doing any direct importing, that last 5 to 8 minutes is a really good summary of things to think about as you consider that. But folks, hopefully this has been helpful for you. And until next time, happy fabricating.